Being a superhero slash villain and getting paid to do that seems like it would be the perfect job, and usually it is, but when you're working in a Marvel movie, it's not always as great as it seems. I mean, Daredevil and Electra happened, so we're looking at 10 of the times plus a few bonuses when actors regretted being a part of Marvel movies. When it came to the big three of the Infinity era of the MCU, Thor was always the one who had a little more passion devoted to his character, if you know what I mean. But Hemsworth wasn't always too excited to show off the goods. When talking about the Thor movie no one likes and Joss Whedon, in an interview, Hemsworth told MTV that he just said that there needed to be something romantic in there. Then he said, "Chris, get your shirt off." I said, "Well, I don't know. What's the why? What are we doing?" But then, unfortunately, that situation happened again, this time during Thor Ragnarok. In an interview with Cinema Blend, he said, then director Taika Waititi said, "No, I think we need a shirt off scene." I was like, ugh, no, we've done that. Don't make me do it again. I just think it has to be different each time. You have an obligation to mix it up and advance it in some way. Hopefully, with Thor touring the galaxy with its guardians, he won't have to take his shirt off again, or at least they could just ask him first. Interestingly though, the Thor trilogy has left a lot of people sour, like with Natalie Portman threatening to leave after Patty Jenkins' firing on the movie which shall not be named, Malekith's actor Christopher Eccleston having very strong words about playing Malekith, and Idris Elba's issue with Heimdall's characterization, or really lack thereof. Maybe with Jane Foster Thor there'll be more of a shakeup, but it's not like Malekith or Heimdall are gonna be returning for that one, so sucks for them, I guess. Now let's talk about a movie that pains me to revisit, X-Men Origins Wolverine. We all know that this isn't the best take on Wolverine or Team X or really anything aside from the best Victor Creed, but of course, it was Deadpool who had it the worst. Now, just in case you somehow didn't know, Deadpool is a guy with a big personality and is often called the Merc with the Mouth, and in X-Men Origins, they sewed his mouth shut and made him probably the most serious character, and that's pretty much all you need to know to understand that they just did whatever with him. We even got Ryan Reynolds as pre-Deadpool Wade Wilson that showed off what he could be, and while I'll personally defend the idea of taking a bunch of different powers and trying to put them into one dude as a cool idea, but that's just not who Deadpool is, and Reynolds agreed, telling People magazine, "It was a very frustrating experience. I was already attached to the Deadpool movie, we hadn't at that point written a script yet, Origins came along and it was sort of like, play Deadpool in this movie or we'll get someone else to." And I just said, I'll do it, but it's the wrong version. Deadpool isn't correct in it. Luckily, he's gotten to right those wrongs twice and really make the character his own, and soon he's even gonna be in the MCU, so as long as no one messes that up, it'll be fine. Now, from an anti-hero to a straight-up villain, let's talk about Thanos and his violent but cool intro in Infinity War. Now, before the movie, I had only been a fan of the character for a few years because of Thanos' 2016 annual #1, where he tortures a dude on his birthday for no reason and stopped a lady from improving the world by helping an other old lady cross the street. All great stuff. But all that was to say that even though Thanos is pretty much every negative adjective you could think of, even he has his limits. Or at least the actor who plays him does. So Josh Brolin really didn't have the stomach to snuff out the lights in Loki's eyes, but it's not because he had any problem with the idea of doing that. I mean, come on, he's done a lot worse, but it's because of how Brolin recognized what the character meant to Tom Hiddleston. In an interview with USA Today, gonna be a lot of interviews in this one as you can tell, Brolin said he had been with that character for so long and he's so lauded for doing it. Tom was so vulnerable at that moment, so choking him out wasn't the most fun thing I've ever done. Again, in the grand scheme of things, not his worst thing, but luckily Brolin has cable to balance out his acting karma. Well, at least a little bit. Going back to the first Avengers now, let's talk about the guy who should have probably just been in the Olympics. The first Avengers brought a lot of characters together for the first time, so of course everyone wasn't gonna get the same amount of love, and unfortunately Hawkeye got the worst of it, especially since he was just a mind-controlled zombie for so much of it. When talking to Hero Complex, Jeremy Renner talked about his disappointments with the character, saying that at the end of the day, 90% of the movie, I'm not the character I signed on to play. I'm literally in there for 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden, all I could really work on was the physical part of it because that didn't change. That was just the biggest challenge to overcome in playing the guy. Most likely, this is why in Age of Ultron, his character got expanded upon and we got to see his family and wife, played by the wonderful Linda Cardellini, as well as the pep talk that he gives to Wanda. He's even gotten a spin-off show to really flesh out his character, so the lesson here is that if you ever feel disappointed in a project of yours, complain about it publicly and maybe it'll work out. When it comes to the American live-action versions of Spider-Man, I still love you, Takuya, Andrew Garfield Garfield's adaptation isn't looked at with the rosiest of glasses. One of the biggest parts of that comes from the characterization and the way the overarching story seemed to take a backseat to Sony wanting to focus on the broader Spider-Verse. While on Variety's Actors on Actors series, Andrew said that I signed up to serve the story and to serve this incredible character that I've been dressing as since I was 3, and then it gets compromised and it breaks your heart. I got heartbroken a little bit to a certain degree. Personally, I think this sentiment, coupled with how a lot of the Spider-Man fandom tends to pit the various Spider-Men against each other instead of talking about what makes them stand out and what they enjoy about those takes, can really take a toll on you when you love the character so much. But Andrew wasn't the only one to feel sour about their time in the webhead sticky situations, because Kirsten Dunst, the OG MJ, said that because Mary Jane being little more than just someone for Peter to save, she didn't even want to finish the trilogy, but after some convincing, decided to come back and finish the 3rd movie, but we know how that one turned out. Someone who didn't like acting in the movie they were in and also didn't come back for subsequent movies though was Hugo Weaving. When the Red Skull showed up, I thought he was going to be a much bigger part of the MCU, and when that didn't happen, I thought it was an interesting choice to have arguably Cap's biggest villain only be a problem once, but after reading an interview with Weaving from Collider, it makes a little more sense. But I don't think I'll be in Captain America 2 or 3. I don't think Red Skull will be there, and it's not something I would want to do again. I'm glad I did it. I did sign up for a number of pictures, and I suppose contractually I would be obliged to if they forced me to, but they wouldn't want to force someone to do it if they didn't want to. But then in another interview with Time Out, he said, "Oh yeah, I loved playing that character Red Skull. It was a lot of fun. We were all obliged to sign up for 3 pictures. I was thinking Red Skull probably wouldn't come back in Captain America, but he may well come back as a villain in the Avengers." Okay, so it seems like he came around to wanting to reprise his role, but because of what he called impossible negotiations with Marvel, he was replaced as the Maroon Marauder in the last 2 Avengers. While it would have been nice for Weaving to get one last performance, especially if there was a scene between him and Cap once he's putting the Infinity Stones back, but Ross Marquand did a great job for the little time that he was on screen. Alright, now for Iron Man 2, the movie of high highs and low lows, which in my humble opinion would have been much better if one of the actors got his way. No, not him, we'll get to him later. Yeah, that boy Mickey Rourke. In the movie we got, he was pretty one note about his revenge, and while that want for revenge largely would have remained the same, the difference would have come with how his characterization would have come across. He worked with the writer, Justin Theroux, and Jon Favreau to bring some more depth to the character, but unfortunately, Marvel having the final say ended up cutting a lot of it. Now, I don't think that Whiplash would have been this big player in the MCU, but I do think that he could have been a little more 3D than what we got. Now on to the other Iron Man character that didn't have a fun time. Well, this is actually just another contractual issue, but if I know anything about the man himself, is that everything isn't very easy with him. At the time, you have to remember that the first Iron Man was still a huge risk, not just because Iron Man wasn't as big a name as Spider-Man, yes I know about the song, I don't care, but also because RDJ wasn't a household name for good reasons. So Terrence Howard was actually the highest paid member of the cast, but once everything changed and Downey wanted to renegotiate because he knew everyone loved the first movie because of him, that made Howard try to do the same, but because he wasn't really lighting up the screen with his performance, he had to be replaced. Since then, he hasn't been that big of a name on a poster, and in an interview with Hollywood.com, he said that the worst thing I witnessed was Iron Man killing my career. Or trying to. They tried to. Now, this isn't a video talking about actors' careers, so I'll just end this section with saying that maybe that advice earlier where you publicly complain isn't the best. Another issue stemming from the MCU's growing pains comes from the first, and so far even after 10 years, the only Hulk movie in the MCU. So Edward Norton's garnered a pretty negative reputation in terms of how easy he is to work with, and this is probably one of the worst instances of this. From Marvel releasing uncharacteristically spicy public statements about actors, to agents responding in tow sending shots back and forth like Stark missiles across the desert, from the information that's easily found, it seems more like this was a case of Norton wanting to make a movie that Marvel really had no interest in, and instead of this coming out, say at the beginning or contracting phase, these issues just kept coming up long after he was recast, with Norton bringing it up at Bruce Willis's roast because why not? Marvel seems happy with Mark Ruffalo even with his loose lips though, so I guess at least one party isn't worried about something that happened over a decade ago. Finally, let's talk about Marvel's first family. Now, for a team that's as popular as it was, it's pretty wild that even after the X-Men made their film debut, along with Spider-Man showing that there's a pretty good market for superhero movies, the Fantastic Four just struggled and struggled and struggled. But those struggles weren't just in the box office or wherever critics were before the internet. The director, Tim Story, which is a hilarious name for someone making movies, also made filming a pretty stressful time, especially for Susan Storm herself, Jessica Alba. In an interview with Elle magazine, she recalled that during a crying scene, Story told her, "It looks too real, it looks too painful. Can you be prettier when you cry? Cry pretty, Jessica." He was like, "Don't do that thing with your face. Just make it flat. We can CGI the tears in," which caused her to start asking, am I not good enough? Are my instincts and my emotions not good enough? Do people hate them so much that they don't want me to be a person? All the doubt that came during her time on both movies, but specifically Rise of the Silver Surfer, made her almost quit acting altogether. Since then, she's still been pretty consistent in what she's been in, and hopefully she's had more good experiences than negative ones. Sometimes being in Marvel movies suck, but hey, Marvel, or even DC at this point, if you need someone to not complain about something, I'm ready to go. Don't call me, I'll call you.